Many people believe that paying attention to the terminally online political debate space is a complete waste of time. And to be clear, that is almost entirely true.
No, it's not.
It is the case.
That is false.
It is the case.
So
it's perfectly reasonable.
However, as one of the pioneers of the emerging field of applied sociology, aka meme smithing, I can tell you that there is a lot of social psychological potential that is actively brewing in these spaces. One need only look at the Mac to understand. The meme adoption curve, or MAC, is modeled after the technology adoption curve, which shows how a given technology goes from obscure novelty to an everyday need. The cell phone started out as a $2,000 cumbersome brick that barely anyone used, but eventually enough people adopted the technology to the point where it became built into the fabric of society. You can see on the left side of the curve are the so-called innovators. These are the socially deviant freaks who don't care how ridiculous they look lugging around brick-sized cell phones or those stupid-ass VR ski goggles. Yes, they look foolish at first, but as time goes on, more and more people recognize the utility these technologies provide and adopt them themselves. This is identical to the process by which cultural technologies called ideas or memes are adopted by society. The ideas that end up dominating in niche terminally online spaces eventually make their way across the meme adoption curve and into broader society. 5 years ago, people would not believe that college students were being asked to share their pronouns when they introduced themselves in class. Now, if I refuse to refer to my otherkin coworker as Zimzer, I am, and I mean this literally, technically at risk of committing workplace harassment. The meme lived almost exclusively in online Tumblr blogs and eventually came to dominate the HR departments of most major corporations. And whether it's abortion for transgender women or the conservative embrace of sexual responsibility for men, it's hard to imagine these ideas showing up on debate stages unless they had been refined and tested for memetic significance in online spaces further upstream.
I believe in reproductive justice. What that means is that just because a woman, or let's also not forget someone in the trans community, a trans female, is poor, doesn't mean they shouldn't have the right to exercise that right to choose.
And also, here's the missing ingredient in this movement: sexual responsibility for men. So we can say men deserve more responsibility. So we can tell women we're all in this together. It's not men's rights versus women's rights. It's about human rights.
Key to understanding the Mac is being able to clearly identify which individuals occupy what part of the curve. At the front end of the curve are the cognitive berserkers known as autists. These are the people who spend virtually all of their time online, using their incredibly high IQs to come up with arguments designed to stress test and deconstruct every possible idea/meme that they encounter. Unlike normies, who don't even think about the memes that program their attitudes, the terminally online autist will not accept any idea, no matter how self-evident, without a bulletproof logical argument or a peer-reviewed study. This antisocial and deeply unintuitive way of engaging with ideas may be insufferable for most, but it is precisely what enables the autists to test and refine the memetic fitness of the endless stream of new and stupid ideas that emerge online.
Almost all ideas are wrong. And it doesn't matter if they're your ideas or someone else's ideas. They're probably wrong, and even if they strike you with the force of brilliance, your job is to assume, first of all, that they're probably wrong, and then to assault them with everything you have in your arsenal and see if they can survive.
And can you justify why it's not moral for a brother to hump his sister?
It's important to recognize that just as most new technologies never make it far along the technology adoption curve,
it's also the new worst product I think I've ever reviewed.
Almost everything that happens at the front end of the Mac is completely and utterly irrelevant. Joshua Citarella does a good job documenting the vast range of meaningless political identities that survive exclusively in the terminally online memetic swamps. And anyone who has kept up with the psychological misadventures of the autists on the front end of the Mac are aware of how much memetically insignificant noise saturates this space. However, a small proportion of the memes discussed at the autistic end of the Mac do actually prove to possess a great deal of memetic fitness, and these memes eventually make their way across the curve to the influencer part of the Mac. Influencers are those individuals who are themselves autistic enough to survive in terminally online spaces, but who also have the ability to communicate those ideas in a way that is digestible to a more generalized audience. Comedians, podcasters, and social commentators who talk about politics but don't really make it their main thing tend to dominate this part of the curve, and different influencers can exist at different points along this section of the MAC. PF Jung Media would exist closer to the autistic end of the influencer curve. My League of Politics videos are good examples of taking complex normative philosophical claims that no normie could possibly have time to investigate, like postmodernism equals bad or pragmatism equals good, and conveying those claims to a broader audience using humor, irony, and a familiar metaphorical grounding. Someone like Dave Chappelle or Jon Stewart would be closer to the normie end of the curve, and someone like Hassan Piker might exist in between. Once influencers have infected enough people with a given meme, it begins to become mainstream. It's important to understand that by the time a meme gets to the normie section of the MAC, the meme will almost certainly have mutated and been reduced to a much less sophisticated version of the original meme that the autists and influencers interacted with. For example, there are plenty of normies who would call themselves socialists, but almost none of them are purely logic-brained enough to have actually evaluated the memetic fitness of Karl Marx's ideas around dialectical materialism or the labor theory of value. But that's the key thing to understand. Normies do not need to have a fleshed out understanding of an idea in order for them to adopt it. Most people form their beliefs not through rigorous logical and empirical analysis, but simply by imitating the beliefs of those they hold in high regard. The socialism meme complex wouldn't have been able to spread to normies unless it had been refined and adopted by influencers who normies respect. This dynamic is made even clearer in a religious context. A very small number of highly rationalistic theologians engage in obscure debates about the nature of God. Priests and pastors pay attention to these debates and then convert these obscure ideas into actionable sermons that they share with their congregation. Most normie Christians don't read the Bible, but they will profess to believe whatever it is their priest or pastor happens to believe because they trust him to make the right judgment on complex theological matters the congregation doesn't have time to concern themselves with. Now, if you want to succeed in the field of applied sociology, there are certain nuances that, if understood, will grant you an advantage in seizing the means and memes of cultural production. Many people will dismiss the importance of an idea because only a small number of people believe in it, and those that do are usually confined to the eternally online hellholes of 4chan and Reddit. This is the model that comes to mind when people think of an insignificant idea. If a society has 1 million people in it and only 10,000 people have been infected by a given meme, then it seems intuitive to say this idea is fringe. But this is not the model that should come to mind. This is the model you should use to understand the memetic fitness of a given idea. If 1% of the population gets infected by a biological virus, depending on how infectious it is, we can very easily predict that it will only be a matter of time before the rest of the population gets infected. By the same token, if an idea, otherwise known as a memetic virus, is present in 1% of the population, then depending on how memetically fit the idea is, we can predict that it will also only be a matter of time before the rest of the population gets infected. This idea is known as the 3.5% rule, which posits that only 3.5% of the people in a given society need to be infected by a meme for that meme to eventually take over. This is precisely what happened in the Weimar Republic, the Russian Empire, and the American colonies, where only a small minority were committed fascists, Bolsheviks, or separatists prior to those movements dominating their respective societies. You might think that obscure debates between anarcho-capitalists and Christian nationalists have no bearing on contemporary politics, and for the moment you may be right. But when a leading influencer in the libertarian movement essentially concedes to the memetic superiority of Christian ethics, we can use this information to predict that a meme complex like Christian nationalism will likely outcompete a meme like libertarianism over the coming years.
I would agree with you that yes, there is something from God that instructs me as to what is right and wrong in this world. To get to a place of true, like, right and wrong, I don't know that you can get there without believing in something bigger than the realm that we're existing in right now.
The significance of an idea is not evaluated by how many people believe in it at a given point in time. It's evaluated by understanding how memetically fit the idea is in and of itself. And calculating the memetic fitness of an idea is an advanced applied sociological concept I'll be expanding upon in future videos. Until then, you'll have to make do with the Candace Owens Champion Spotlight coming out in a few days. Good luck, everyone, and Godspeed.